Good morning, guys. About 8:30 in the morning right now, and I'm so well dressed today, right? I'm not wearing shorts underneath. See, I'm actually wearing pants. I hope you can see. Anyway, right, and I got my hair up. I'm not wearing a hairband, right? Okay, let me adjust the lighting real quick. And the reason I'm well dressed, not so well dressed. I'm somewhat well dressed is because I'll be presenting another public speaking workshop to my firstly, Khian presenting a public speaking workshop. Surprise, surprise, no, not surprise, not surprising, because I have been presenting public speaking workshops for so many times and I have been uploading them, so I hope you guys have been benefiting from them. Right, this one I'm going to present to my high school juniors. So I got invited by my high school to go back to present about doing research and things like that, and a bit of public speaking skills. But I'm so excited because it's my first time talking about research, the process of research, how you should research, how you should look for sources that are credible, considering the origins of the sources and things like that. I think these things are really, really important, and I'm gonna record myself as well, and I hope you enjoy the upcoming workshop. I have not practiced. I always do not practice. I always have everything in my mind, and I kind of just, practice my articulation skills, I guess. I'll see you guys later. And it feels good to, to dress up well, because I'm not sure which video is going to be up first, but in one of the videos that I recorded, the Khian video, how to get good grades, I mentioned that, dressing up well is a big factor that actually influences how you get on with your day-to-day routine, because when you're dressed up well, you feel good. And yeah, I would like to think that people prefer looking good than looking bad. At least that's me. People make their choices, but okay, anyway, too much of digression. I'm gonna get to it and then, yeah, enjoy.
So how do you get people on to your side? But you have to do it using reasoning, not ranting. Okay? Alright, so we are now going to move to the next part, and I've got a very special guest speaker who's going to come and deliver this next part for us. I want to introduce him first. He was an HIS student from 2014 to 2019, so he's very much a senior alumni, and I've also taught him, and it's a pleasure to know him. Throughout his years at HIS, he was actively involved in public speaking because he too believes that effective communication is very important in someone's academic career and everyday life. He's currently studying psychology in Canada. He's very excited to be back in HIS and to share his effective communication with you. And please subscribe to his YouTube channel and plug this for him for more tips. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on to our very own FnK. Everybody, round of applause if you can unmute your mic.
Thank you. Hello everyone, how are you guys doing? How are you guys feeling this morning? It's so nice to see that all of you are back here in school, online school, even though you're done with IGCSE. I remember when I was done with IGCSE, the next day I was in Penang already. Well, obviously you cannot do that now because of COVID. I'm just wondering, am I supposed to share my slides or?
You can, see if you can present. I think you should be able to.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Do you guys see the...
Yes.
Right. I'm wondering how... I'm sorry, this is my first time using Google Meet. Usually we use Zoom, so I'm wondering how I can look at the next slide, the presenter's view.
If you go to... There should be another tab on the top.
That should be... You know what, it's okay, I'll just split screen.
Oh, by the way, while you're getting that sorted, guys, this is where you go get your pieces of paper, or you need to write or jot down. This is where you do it, okay, because this is important. So he's going to tell you exactly how you want to, what are the logistics. So go get your notepad or your pieces of paper. You can write on your iPad. Yeah, okay.
All right, as I mentioned, I'll be talking about message delivery, the research portion of message delivery of effective communication. And right now I cannot see you guys because I'm splitting screen, so if you have any questions, just unmute. Yeah. Alright, when we talk about effective communication and research process and things like that, the chronological order should be something like this. So you start your research, and then you do your research, you write your script, and then you present your research or your script or whatever it is. But today, I would like to present it in such a way that, I want to start with presenting your research first. So the presentation portion, and then I'm going to go into research process, and then I'm going into writing your script. And then you might think like, oh my gosh, why is it like, the other way around? Am I trying to be pretentious? Maybe I am, but no, I'm not trying to be pretentious. The reason, why the change in order? The reason for me to change the order is because I feel that presenting your research, you guys already know, and you guys already talked a lot about that in the beginning of the entire program. So I feel that you already know this. And what makes me more sure that you already know this is that I'm sure all of you, or at least some of you, have presented on this stage before, right? Wait, I got the wrong one, sorry. This one, right? So, and technically all of you have presented here because back when I was in HIS at least, the public speaking competition was mandatory, so you have to take part regardless of your preference and your feeling about public speaking. And then there will be the finalists who is presented on this stage. So I think that you already know about presenting your research. It's more like style, hand gestures, body language, eye contact, and etc., etc. The only difference I think right now that you might that might be novel would be eye contact, because in the past when in-person presentations you would look at the audience's eyes, right? But right now you have to look at the pinhole, and that takes practice. When I first started doing online presentations, it's something that I had to learn as well. So today, the bulk of today's presentation is going to be on research process and writing your script. Let's start with research process. First of all, what is research? What do you think of when you think about research? Can anyone unmute? Otherwise, I'm going to start calling names.
Information for your topic to present.
I'm sorry?
Getting information for a topic you want to present.
Yes, getting information for a topic. So let's take it another step further. How do you get that information? Does anyone want to answer?
You can use Google to look it up, or you can use a library and access various books on how to better understand what you're researching.
I think that's a fantastic answer. In fact, you have read my mind, because the next slide is actually Google. Right, in school, and actually now everyday life, it could be in school, hey, could you find out the date for World War I? And then you would Google, right? Or at home, your mom would be like, hey, could you find out the recipe for butter cake? And then you would Google as well. And after Googling, usually most of the time, the systematic thing that you would think about next would be Wikipedia, right? Because Wikipedia has a plethora of information that we can glean from, right? And then in today's world, it's gone beyond social. It's gone beyond Wikipedia. You can even find information from social media like Facebook, Instagram, and this, might be your idea of research, and it was definitely mine in my younger years. And then you would think like, oh my gosh, research is so simple because all you have to do is just Google and then put the paper down, write your script, present your script. But of course, research is not as simple as that, because if it was, right, I would have said, oh, the PhD that I did was so easy. And I'm sure the PhD that I did was much more than Googling and Wikipedia-ing, right?
Yes, it was more.
Yeah. So research actually is not that simple. So let's break down this research process portion into 3 parts. I want to start with how you start, obviously, and then the process and how you end. Let's go with how you start. I think that when you start with any form of research, the first question you want to ask yourself is, are you familiar with the topic? Let's pose a research question here. Let's say I want to find out, why is the BTS McDonald's set meal so popular right now? Not only in Malaysia, but globally, right? And before I answer that research question or do any form of further research, I'm going to say, okay, am I familiar with the topic? Your answer might be yes. And what do you mean by yes? It means, okay, I know what BTS is. I know what McDonald's is. Okay, I'm gonna do my research. But if you're someone who is not a big fan of K-pop like myself, although people say I do look like Korean, it's weird, your answer might be no, I'm not familiar with the research question. If I say like, hey, Elizabeth, why is the BTS McDonald's set meal so popular? You might be like, oh, what is BTS and what is McDonald's? Is it behind the scene? Yeah, I don't know. Or if I ask you the same research question, your answer might be, I don't know lah. Like, I have a little bit of idea of what BTS is. Yeah, I know what McDonald's is, but I'm not really sure. Sometimes, very often, you actually don't know what you don't know. Has anyone experienced that? Or is it just me? Right, so
I have experienced that
it's a common feeling to have. So don't feel lost or anything like that if you have such a feeling. So if your answer is yes, I'm familiar with the topic, great. Get started now. Go to the next step, which is the process. More on this later. But what if your answer is no, I'm not familiar with the topic. I don't know what BTS is. I don't know what McDonald's is. Or like, I don't even know what I know. And I don't even know what I don't know. Then you want to do some Googling and then Wikipedia. But Khian, you mentioned that Wikipedia, our research is not as simple as Wikipedia-ing. So one thing I want to take away, if there's anything that I want you to take away from this presentation, it will be this. So grab your note-taking materials. Wikipedia is a great place to start, but not to end. Why? Because, I'm sorry, does anyone have any question?
Well, actually, I kind of wanted to answer that. Can I answer that? Sorry.
Sure.
Because as my GP teachers, both of them have said, you need to use various websites to better establish what is completely accurate. Because if you rely too much on one source, then they may not be entirely relatable. However, if there is one fact popping up in various sources, then that fact becomes more reliable since as more people agree with it, therefore it's more accurate.
Right. I love the answer that you provided, but one thing that you might want to consider is that it's not necessary that more people agree. It's not necessary that if something has more agreement that thing is necessarily true. So that's something that you might want to think about, right? So why is Wikipedia a great place to start? Because the information there is so simple, right? If I don't know anything about BTS and I start reading a bunch of research papers on BTS, hopefully there aren't research papers like that, but let's get into something more research-y. If I want to find out, is exercising great for your body? I don't want to start reading huge, difficult research papers on exercising because I don't even know about the simple components of exercising yet. So you want to use Wikipedia to kind of have a general idea of what everything is. And why it is not a great place to end is because, like what Khian said, you don't want to only rely on one source, right? So let's say you've done your Wikipedia, so okay, now I know what BTS is, I know what McDonald's is, I have a rough idea, right? Now, you have a rough idea of what things are. Oh my gosh, I keep forgetting to go to the next slide. I'm so sorry for that, guys. Now that you're done with that, you want to go to the process, which is the next part of the research process. So what is the process? I think there are a few things. This is not an exhaustive list, but there are a few big things that you might want to consider when you are doing your research, writing your TED Talk script. The origin, the credibility, and what about contradictory findings? If you're confused by all these words, don't worry, I'll break them down bit by bit. But how many history students are there here? History students who took the history paper. I love you guys, I did history too. I love history, I still love history. And you're probably familiar with the word origin because in history classes, your teacher would mention something like, oh, what is the origin of the source? Where is this source from, right? So let's look at origin. Origin, like I mentioned, is basically where your sources are from, right? Because today there are so many people, organizations, places that are bombarding you with all types of sources that like you don't even know where to start. So one thing that you want to consider when you're doing your research is, where are your sources from? Is it from organizations? Is it a profit or non-profit organization? Scientific and credible journals. What does credible mean? It's the second point, right? I'll talk about that. Newspapers, cool Instagram posts, less cool Instagram posts. So one thing you want to keep in mind is that there is a plethora of sources where things are from. So be very careful. Well, not be very careful, but keep that in mind. Know that the piece of information that you've found could be found from somewhere else, and you might read and find out something different. So that's something you want to pay attention to. Don't only rely on one source like I mentioned. The next part, credibility. What does credibility mean? The next slide I'm going to show is going to be a little bit of a tongue twister, so I hope I pronounce things correctly. Who or what wrote, published, posted this? Is the person credible? Should you trust the person? How much should you trust the person? Right? Nowadays there are so many people publishing information, like I mentioned in Origin. So looking at all of these, it's like, okay, should I trust this person? If the person is a researcher or an expert in the field, most of the time, not all the time, they are pretty credible. If they're journalists, maybe not so much. Let me tell you this fun fact. Who here thinks that there's such thing as emotional intelligence? Could you please just say yes?
I think I understand it remotely.
Right. So, on social media and things like that, people say, there's emotional intelligence, EQ, how you deal with people. But fun fact, there's no such thing as emotional intelligence in the psychological literature. So emotional intelligence was actually devised by a journalist. And right now, the question would be, intelligence is a psychological phenomena. It's a psychological thing. When you are looking at psychological things, would you rather trust the psychological literature that is written by psychological experts, or to trust a journalist? That is up to you to decide. For me, after reading and knowing about this, I would be like, okay, maybe there could be emotional intelligence that we have not done further research into, but for now it's like, I don't think there is such a phenomenon. Or the information that you find could be your favorite IG model. Are these people credible or not? Something for you to think about. And of course, the most credible source, Chatty Khian, just joking. Right. So after that, you want to ask yourself, can you trust the sources or not? And why not? Are they selling you something? If someone says, I have the best product in the world, and I can back it up with this research, I have a doctoral in whatever field, and I'm trying to sell you this. It's like, oh, I see. Then you might want to change how you think about that person or that product. Do they have a reason to be biased because of political orientation, because of personal experience, because of background, because of educational level? So many things that you want to consider. So when you're doing your research, I don't want to tell you and say this is the most credible source or person, but I just want you to think about it, right? Keep these things in mind as you're doing your research and picking out information. The third part, contradictory findings. What if I find contradictory findings, right? What if in one source, some people say there is EQ, emotional intelligence, and then in this other source, there's no such thing as EQ. What do I do? What you do is you repeat the research process. That's your bet. And then you would think, Khian, what do you mean by repeating the research process? It's kind of sad, but you have to read more. Just keep reading more, finding out more information, because like Khalik said, there is so many people and websites and organizations that are putting out information. So you need to read more and find the best answer for yourself. And then finally, we come to the third part of research process, which is how you end. See, if you, by the end of your research, you have a conclusive finding, example, exercising is good for your health. That's like, boom, out there. Everybody says it's true. And you cannot seem to find any contradictory finding, right? Then boom, you're set. I can talk about how exercising is good. But what if there's a lot of contradictory findings? Don't worry, because in your presentation, your conclusion does not have to be conclusive. It does not have to be like, okay, this is my final decision. Exercising, no. There is EQ in the world, and I'm definitely true. You don't have to be that certain. You can be like, you know, on the one hand, people say this, some people say there's EQ, some people say there isn't EQ. And if you notice, and if you've been listening, that's what I've been doing throughout my presentation. I don't say like, hey, you know, this is how you should do it, this is the way to do it, it's the my way or the highway or something like that. There's a similar quote to this, right? It's more like letting the audience find out, especially when the topic that you choose is really, you know, there is no concrete finding in that topic. But you do want to make a decision in terms of how you present it. You can say, okay, as of now, we don't know whether EQ exists, but I think that EQ exists because of this, this, and this. And then we come to the second part, the third part of this presentation, writing your script. Again, in writing your script, there are 3 parts that I want to share with you. I want to break down this writing your script section into 3 separate parts. There's content, there's structure, and there is your use of words. And use of words briefly mentioned in the Kevin Hart tweet. So let's explore that a little bit more. Content, tips. One tip that I would strongly suggest you to keep in mind is that because we talked about how, you know, there's so much information on the net or whatever source you're using, right? You want to be very selective. See, Wikipedia is a great place to start, but does that mean that you should start picking up information from that first place that you started? Or does it mean that you have to pick up information from the last source that you started? No, it does not mean that. You want to read and you want to be very, very selective. Studying tip as well. If you go on to A-levels or whatever exams, you want to be very selective in what you study. It's good to know a lot of things, but for the exams, you can only know this much, right? There's a limit for your memory. And likewise, there's a limit for how much your audience can digest in that 5-minute presentation. So be very selective. You want to be relevant. Don't start, you know, posting random information that's like not relevant. So I've thrown out some fun facts here and there throughout this presentation. I hope I have been relevant enough at least. You also want to be helpful and useful, right? You don't want to, you know, present information that is not going to be helpful and useful. And because this is so subjective, I'm not going to provide you with any examples. You can think about that yourself. And of course, because research and like information that you're about to present from research usually is really bland, you want to be interesting. How should you be interesting? You can use humor if you're funny. If you're not, you can try as well. I always do that. You can vary your vocal variety, right? So it's going back to that presenting your research portion, right? Be interesting. Structure. Second part. How should I structure my presentation? Honestly, it's up to you. And don't worry, I'm not gonna just show the slide. I'm gonna elaborate a little bit on this. Here are some examples of different types of structure that you can use. Could be argumentative structure, could be, you know, one side, the other side, could be exploratory. You don't have to make an argument. I mean, there is a thesis statement, there is a main point, like, okay, I'm going to talk about is exercising good for our health. But you don't have to, you know, really argue for one point and really argue for another. You can keep exploring. Maybe you want to focus on one part of exercising, maybe one type of exercising, and then you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Example of badminton. Is badminton good for your health? Go into badminton. What is badminton? Why do you think it's good for your health? And how do you think people can benefit from it? How do you think people can not benefit from it, right? It's just picking out various forms of information. Now, exploratory type of presentations are, you know, it's a slippery slope because you might go on to present irrelevant information. So if you do want to do an exploratory presentation, be very careful, be very extremely selective. It can be descriptive, it can be narrative, What do I mean by narrative? You could tell a story and then talk about how the research relates to your story. People usually do that in public speaking competitions, if you have noticed. But a rule of thumb that you want to keep in mind is that usually whatever structure you use is going to be like this. Tell the people what you're going to tell them. So it could be like, of course you don't have to be like, hey, I'm going to talk about how exercising benefits our health. But it could be like, exercising, blah, 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 our health. And then you tell them, you go into the detailed information. And then at the end, when you do your closing, you tell them what you told them. You reiterate either your point, either the question that you pose, could go in many other ways. But that's the rule of thumb that you want to follow. It's really similar. Is English literature still mandatory in HIS?
From next year, no.
Oh, that's sad. But all of you have done literature, right? So it's kind of like your PQA in history and English lit. So you can see how actually this is P, and then tell them what you're going to tell them is your P. Tell them it's kind of like the quotation, the evidence, right? And then tell them what you told them, kind of like your analysis, and your L, link. There's PEAL as well, right? PEAL. The third part of writing your script, this is very important, I should like to spend some time on this, is the use of words. And I'm telling you, use of words is very, extremely, very, very, very important. And there are a lot of reasons for why it is important, but I'm going to tell you one of the reasons. Because if you don't use your words correctly, that might sound mean, but it's true, you will sound stupid. And I mean it, you will sound very, very stupid. So instead of talking about what stupid means, let's talk about how you should not sound stupid. One rule of thumb that you want to follow when you're presenting your research, this is another piece of information that I hope you take away from when you do your speech. So take notes. Don't be too certain. Don't be too certain. Don't be like, EQ definitely exists. There's only one reason why the BTS McDonald's is popular. What other examples are there? Exercising is definitely good for your health. Like these might sound, true, right? But you don't want to be too certain. And then the next question might be, but Khian, shouldn't we be confident when we are presenting our presentation? There's a difference between being confident and being too certain. Being confident means that you know what you're gonna talk about. You know, if you're talking about why BTS McDonald's set is famous and popular, being confident means I know a lot about BTS, I know a lot about McDonald's, I know a lot about what being popular is and what being popular means, and I'm gonna talk about that. But being too certain is like, there's only one reason or two reasons why the BTS McDonald's set is so popular, and it's because of this, this, and this. And these are the reasons, there are no other reasons. That, I think, is being too certain. So I'm going to share with you a slide here which has a list of words. And you might want to take a screenshot or take a photo of this because I think it will be useful. There are two forms of ways in which how you can phrase your sentences. The first one on the left side is conclusive. The second side is hedged. For the most part, I would suggest you to use hedged wording because it shows that you are mature enough to consider and know that there might be a contradictory argument against your own. If you keep using, conclusive words, what you may suggest to the audience is that, okay, this person seems to be saying that everything that he presents or she presents or they present is 100% true and accurate. So in terms of your phrasing, you don't want to be too certain, right? Because if you look at one of the examples, the results support That's like saying, you know, the results support my point and my point is definitely true. But if you look at the alternative, tentatively conclude. For a lot of things, we actually do not have a certain, well actually I would argue that for almost everything, we don't have a certain argument. Because even in scientific research, there might be weaknesses. So don't be too certain and be like, oh, you know, the scientist said this, the research shows this. The research might have weaknesses. So a lot of things you want to consider. And I was thinking of showing you an example of presentation using my YouTube video, but I think we are over time by a huge margin, so I'm not gonna do that. And yeah, that is the end. Thank you again for inviting. Thank you to you guys. I hope this presentation will be at least a little bit helpful to all of you. Do check out my YouTube channel. I talk about psychological stuff, exercising, and things like that. And back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khian. Round of applause, everybody. Thank you, Khian. If you're okay, I will share your YouTube video link on Google Classroom along with the resources.
For sure. Thank you. You can share the slides as well.
Yes. Can we share the slides with them?
Yeah, sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. That was Khian walking us through the how-tos, right? What do you need in order to get your facts together, right? We're going to take a short break. It is now 9:41. How do we feel? 10 minutes okay with everyone?
Sorry.
Yep.
I have to go by 9:50 latest. So if anyone has any questions, I can stay for until 9:50, right?
Yes. If you need to ask Khian any urgent questions,